with a pool of people in the SIPC as well as WMSC. We've also conducted multiple interviews with some senior members of the pub of working in this space itself. And we are fortunate to be able to invite three fellow guests who are very established in its respective fields, very diverse background comprised of wealth management, investment, and financial advice, and have worked in the industry for multiple years. So there will be a fireside chat sort of format going on towards the second half of the session. And I'll now introduce the panel. So we've got Mark Berry, who's with us right now. He is an actuary who has had multiple years of work experience, started off as a life insurance actuary with multiple roles in the traditional field, but he's currently a financial planner in Barry's Actuarial Planning. Has been working in the financial field for multiple years as well, and very passionate in that field. We've got Douglas Isles, who is currently the head of investments in Platinum Asset Management. Prior to that, he was a product actuary for CBA and has spent multiple years in various places. Finally, we've got Farrell, who is unfortunately unable to join us today. He will be online. Hi, Farrell. He is a senior manager at Insignia Financial. He's got 17 years of experience and has worked across multiple roles across investment governance, product, as well as pricing and actuarial. So I guess without further ado, I'll pass this on to Phil, who will be presenting the session. Phil, the chair is yours.
At the same time, one of the things that the working group is concerned about is whether there's also actuaries who are leaving at a faster rate. And part of that could be limited senior roles as you progress through your career in predominantly actuarial roles. So to address or to investigate our concerns, what the working group has been doing has been firstly to conduct a survey to understand what could be firstly, whether we do have a sustainability issue here, and if there is, what could be the potential drivers of a sustainability problem. Now, the matters could be worse if the drivers are systemic in nature, because what that means is there are potential flow and impacts to other practice areas. So not just investments, wealth and advice, but also these other areas which I've got on the right-hand side of my screen. And if this was the case, then I bring everyone's attention to the title of our presentation, which is The Great Actuarial Resignation is Upon Us. Now, a caveat to this is that every practice area will be on its own journey, so the pace of change will vary for each practice area. So just briefly a walkthrough of our session. What I want to do is to provide some snippets of the survey that was conducted within the working group, appreciating that will provide some high-level insights into the sustainability subject matter. But we also want to be able to share some personal experiences. So I'm very happy to have Faro, Mark and Douglas to join us on the panel discussion today to share their insights and to also share their perspectives around the actuarial profession. And then I'd lastly like to welcome members of the audience to also share their own personal experiences through the Q&A session. So briefly regarding the survey, which was conducted across the members of the Wealth Management Subcommittee, as well as the Superannuation and Investments Practice Committee, I would summarize the insights into three sets of findings, which I will go through progressively. So the first finding is from a student perspective, and a career in wealth is unappealing to students. So some of the verbatim feedback that we got from the survey participants include students not interested or unaware of the career pathways within investments, wealth and advice. And personally, I think part of the issue here is an anchoring of the concept of diminishing opportunities within defined benefit funds, which is only one subset within the wealth and superannuation space. Another item of feedback is that the retirement and wealth brand is not well promoted in universities. But if I turn this around, it could be a potential aspect of our strategy going forward, which is how can we enhance the brand within universities? And finally, a consequence of the first two items is if you look at it from an employer point of view, there is potentially a lack of suitable graduates as they look to fill those lower level analyst roles in their organizations. The second set of findings was from a member personal reflection point of view, and a theme around it is not just enough to be a qualified actuary. It's interesting when you think about it from an investments point of view, because there isn't a statutory role in this area. So we've had quite a bit of feedback around this, what I've got here in the first point, that it is a skill, not a qualification when you think about the investments area. For some, as they've joined the investments community, as they've progressed through their career, there's been some feedback that they've needed to hide their own personal actuarial brand, which is quite interesting. And then finally, as people have grown through their careers, they've wanted to broaden their skill set and not just be part of the actuarial profession, but to also transition into other professional bodies. My view around this one is there's perhaps some benefits of being part of other professional bodies. It could be, it allows people to be part of a community which has a diversity of backgrounds and skill sets, not just the actuarial skill set. Finally, and this set of findings is really an outside-in view of the actuarial profession. And I would surmise this as the actuary brand is not well understood by others. So some of the verbatim included, the actuarial brand is less valued and there is a lack of differentiation with other professionals. A common conversation I've had with various members within our working group and the broader committees is around how do we differentiate the investment actuaries from those who are qualified under other qualifications such as the CFA. So that's also an interesting piece of feedback there. So the survey has certainly provided interesting sound bites around the sustainability problem that I discussed at the start of this session. So I want to reiterate the question that we present in this session, which is the Great Actuarial Resignation. Is it upon us and what can we do about it? Now, to tackle this question, I think it's important to set some key principles that will help guide us through this. And this is what I've got at the right-hand side, which does tie in well with the theme of our summit, getting close and thinking bigger. So what I believe, or what the working group believes we need to do from here on, is we need to get closer to our members, particularly those who are disengaged and disconnected with the profession. And we do this by thinking bigger, by casting a wider net when designing an attractive member value proposition. Lastly, we appreciate that what the working group has been focusing on is in the areas of investments, wealth, and advice. But as we've embarked on this journey, we believe that there are key learnings that we can take away, which we can broaden to other practice areas and see how we can support the broader actuarial profession. Now, we don't intend in this session that we have the answers to this problem statement, but what we really want to do is to ignite the conversation within the profession. And the first conversation that I want to begin is to have this conversation with our panel guests. So I'm very thankful, Faro, Mark, and Douglas, for you volunteering your time today to be part of this panel discussion. What I want to draw out of this discussion is to understand your career journey thus far, your own personal experiences with the profession, your level of engagement, and also your thoughts around how we can take the profession forward, going forward. So I might begin with Douglas, if I can see you on screen. What I might do is I'll stop share so everyone can see everyone's faces a bit better. And I'm wondering if I can see the SKL room. Maybe Douglas, do you want to give me a shout just to let me know that you're there?
I'm here.
Fantastic. So Douglas, when we spoke previously, I found your story was quite a fascinating one because prior to your recent roles in Platinum Asset Management, your level of engagement with the actuarial profession had varied, but I think today you're quite heavily engaged with the actual profession. So can you talk us through your career journey and what made you decide to be further engaged with the actuarial profession?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Phil. So my background, I guess I trained as an actuary in Scotland back in the late 1990s. I'd always known what an actuary was growing up because my grandfather had been an actuary. My grandmother had trained as an actuary and then stopped to have children in the 1940s. So I was told that it was a good place to go and meet a wife and all these other things. But no, so I knew a lot about what an actuary was. I used to do the puzzles in the Actuary magazine with my grandfather. We used to, everyone he used to talk about anecdotally as I was growing up was the CEO of the company they'd worked for because he had been, and therefore everyone he knew was at that sort of level. They'd all had very accomplished careers. And I think when I was leaving university, I was torn between becoming an investment manager, which looked like quite an uncertain and hard-working setup, against having done a maths degree, actually doing what I probably thought maths was before going to university, which was the application of numerical skills rather than Cambridge University maths degrees are quite theoretical, and I think I got lost at lecture number 2 or something. So I kind of more general than going into investment management of itself. I saw it as a backup, well, not backup's not the right word, but I saw it as a sort of risk remover for my lifestyle. I saw it as, in my head, the opportunity to run whatever it was that I was going to be doing, and these things seemed a lot more certain than investment management, which did seem more glamorous at the time, but the uncertainty was an issue. So as I qualified in '99, I went into the investment department of our firm, started running portfolios, looked at UK equities, and I think what really happens is there just isn't the time to continue with multiple interests at that point. And so, the investment landscape, there's so much to learn. You can never know enough about the companies you're looking at. You can never know enough about various different views that people have. You get to meet all these corporates, you go on trips. It's very, very busy. It's very, very competitive. And the idea of sort of further pursuing actuarial work post-qualification was very hard to really sort of grasp what that really meant. So for me, I spent from '99, well, until today, pretty much working in various investment roles, as an analyst, as a communicator, now running the team at Platinum, but been various different things. I've been a stockbroker at one point as well. There was never time to do any more than what I was trying to do and do what I was doing well. And I think the actuarial profession didn't really offer much from the point of view of furthering, I would say, practical investment knowledge. Now, there's varying conversations people will have, theoretical, better ways of analyzing derivatives and so on and so forth. But the reality is that day-to-day practical work of an analyst in investing is about understanding businesses. And that is something that you learn through case studies, through experience, through conversation, perhaps through the analytical skills, perhaps through CFA, but I would sort of downweight the difficulty of the maths part. I would say the hard part of investing is understanding businesses. So it really comes down to case studies and experience. But the reason to Phil's question of why did I re-engage was that probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I got to a point where my role was to present on behalf of my investment team to clients. And I felt every time I stood up on a stage, it was always going to be nuanced as to whether I was on stage to sell something to the audience or whether I was on stage to inform the audience. So from a sort of somewhere between a selfish perspective of trying to take away that sense of selling, and then from a more societal perspective, that if you're always perceived to be selling something to someone, would society ever take you seriously? So there was this idea there must be a way of working with other people who were informed, professional, and somewhat neutral, I think was the interesting thing to me. So the idea of being a working group like Phil is in today was this idea you could get together with other smart people and try and explore a problem that may have a benefit to other people with no conflict. So I think for me it was about trying to reconnect, and I kind of went back to the fact that there was a small community here where I had something in common, rather than perhaps being from the very large investing community or just sort of life in general. And I actually went back to sort of in my head, it was that, going through exams with a group of people and just working in a sort of close community, and we were all united by the fact that we had, I guess, proven ourselves in a field at a point in time. So I think that's probably what caused me to reconnect and join the wealth management subcommittee, and I got involved doing a little bit of work around COVID as well. So I've had quite a fulfilling period over the last sort of 3 or 4 years.
Thank you, Douglas. Mark, if I can turn to you, you're a financial planner, but prior to financial planning, you spent about 15 years working in the life insurance industry. And I think that was a period where you quite heavily engaged with the actuarial profession. But I understand from our previous chats that there was a bit of a turning point for you in terms of your level of engagement. Maybe talk us through that, Mark.
Yes. Okay, so I was a life insurance actuary, worked in traditional life insurance work for the first 15 years of my career. And like in the 1990s, the life insurance market was a very undisciplined market. Maybe it's still the same way today. But I worked for a company, Zurich Australia, which we got most of our business through multi-agents. And back in those days, for example, like with income protection, if you went to get an income protection policy, one of the big mutuals, you had to have like a 10-year CV and demonstrate real stability. Whereas where I was in multi-agent world, where you get a job for a week, we'll give you a guarantee renewal policy to age 65. It was just crazy. I introduced cotinine testing, which just made us more difficult to deal with compared to everybody else. Advisors consistently sort of moved their books around, and that was encouraged by the rating houses as well as by the remuneration structures. And so the market was just generally undisciplined. And I remember in one meeting at Zurich, one of the team members actually said to me, and this rang through my head even today, if Zurich only did business with the people that Mark Berry wanted to do business with, Zurich wouldn't have a business. And those words actually brought me to my knees, because that guy had a point. Now, they weren't saying to me, look, Mark, you should leave. It was actually, Mark, find an answer. We've got all this distribution. There must be something we can do. Just find a way. And I did. In the end, I reinsured 95% of our business. And for me, there was actually a career highlight to sort of go through. And this was back in 1998, so it was almost 25 years ago. I actually sort of offloaded most of the risk because I just couldn't see how the company I worked for could actually compete in that marketplace. But even after achieving what was really a good outcome, I really felt for the end client. Life insurance was a sales, not an advice process. And really the sales process did result in quite a bit of customer abuse that other people didn't really see because they didn't get out there and get engaged in the process quite like I did. I stayed on for another 4 years after 98, and I loved working at Zurich. I was passionate about the place and I enjoyed my job, but it just really wasn't for me. I could see life insurance becoming a big mess and an even bigger mess. I hated margin on services. I won't go into that today, but I really thought life actuaries were becoming highly skilled technicians, but they weren't really engaged in the process, and in particular in the customer outcomes that our industry was achieving. Now, with me as well, to be truthful, there were also corporate life issues. I just didn't belong in the corporate world. When I was working, there was a lot of waste of the company's resources, and that just didn't sit well with me. I didn't know how to play the corporate political game. I just wasn't good at it. And to be honest, I didn't want to be good at it. And really, in the end, I just didn't belong there. And as I reflect on it, I was really a small business person working in a big corporate, and I just didn't belong there. So I took the plunge, and I went out and set up my own business and started engaging customers directly. And then probably for about the next 10 years, and I actually did become quite distant from the profession. I'd get my annual invoice to join. I'd wonder whether I was going to pay this or what I was going to do. So, because actually being an actuary where I was as a financial planner didn't actually count for anything as well. But, you know, I was very, I was very proud. I suppose I completed all the actuarial exams and I really stood for being an actuary. So I kept involved, but I became quite distant.
Yeah, and I imagine, Mark, running a small financial planning business or a financial planning business would be taking up a lot of time and effort and probably eating into any time you can spend with the actuarial profession. But I understand from our conversations before that one of the interesting things that have happened was that you were invited to attend Macquarie University to provide a presentation. And I think that was a bit of a catalyst for you to get more involved with the profession. Perhaps talk us through that, please.
Yeah, so Sachi Perkle, who's an academic at Macquarie Uni, invited me to come and lecture in the actuarial control cycle on the investment strategy piece of the control cycle. Now, initially, I wasn't exactly bursting with enthusiasm to do this, but Mark Hancock, who's on the investment committee that I'm involved with, he was involved in the course as well, and he sort of said, oh, you'd probably be okay with it. So I read Richard Fitzherbert's book. It's a great book. I encourage you to read it. And I really got re-engaged, and for about 5 years then I ran, I think it was 3 lectures on a Saturday morning in the control cycle, and to my surprise I was able to do it. And that then sort of reconnected me with the profession, and I began to realise that really there's an opportunity here now for actuaries to get out into the world of financial planning, because what I was doing, what was in all that investment strategy stuff that I was presenting as part of the control cycle. So, you know, I'm sitting there talking to people on a daily basis, helping them resolve a way forward with their financial affairs. And I think actuaries, we have the skills to do that. So hence one of the reasons I'm here today, and is to actually sort of promote this as another career path for actuaries to sort of look at, and getting out and touching the customer.
Thank you, Mark. If I turn to you now, Faro, you've started your career in NAB, and I know NAB's gone through various changes over time as well. Interestingly, you also, in your early years, had to go through the global financial crisis as well. So NAB being a very large corporate, I imagine that you would have had to work with quite a number of different people, various disciplines as well. How has that shaped your career development, and how you have engaged with the actuarial profession?
Thanks, Phil. Look, as an actuarial student in the final year at university, okay, there's actually a lot of choice that you can be making about where to start your career. And throughout the years of the remainder of what you can choose is a much bigger world of, let's just say generically, financial services. If you go there and then you're just a generic commerce grad or whatever else, right, competing in a much bigger pool of skill sets. But as the world will have it, after September 11, there were a couple of years where the job markets were rather difficult, and you just applied for all the grad programs that were out there and hope that someone comes to you with an offer. And the National Australia Bank at the time did provide me with a grad offer. So you can say that I've entered the banking, investments, and finance type of sub area of the workforce rather accidentally. You're right, Phil. The global financial crisis hit me in about my second or third year of work, and look, at that time, having gone through September 11 and then the global financial crisis, and worrying about either the stability of your existing job or the industry more widely, you would think about trying to diversify your skill set. And it was at that time that I had undertaken the CFA exams as well, to hopefully get a few things under your CV if the inevitable ever happens. But having worked at a large company for several years, large companies are very complicated entities, right? Whether it be the organization itself or the products and services that it provides. And that complexity brings you to groups of experts in your everyday work who come from a very wide set of backgrounds and skill sets. In my case, I engage with a lot of accountants, lawyers, or generic finance people. And in that kind of environment, you really come to appreciate the skills and experience that each and every person brings, whether it be academic background or the skills they've learned in the various roles that they have. So in my career, I've always approached work with a mindset that you are an individual with your skill sets, experience, and background, and a problem-solving mindset that you bring to the table, which you can collaborate with others with. Now, in terms of why I've retained the actuarial engagement, firstly, it is because I do believe that a diversity of skill sets is valuable in solving complicated problems of the world. Okay, and secondly, it is because I've had the privilege of working for other actuaries, even in banking, investments, and finance organizations. And whilst people you come across in the industry all have a generic idea that actuaries are smart and multidisciplined and therefore a valued part of the workforce, I think their detailed knowledge of what the actuarial skill set is beyond that would be rather limited. Whereas if you're lucky enough to come across other actuaries in your day-to-day work, then they do have a much more of an appreciation of, for example, I think people mentioned it earlier in this chat, the exams that you went through, the control cycle, and other things, which I think is able to realize more of the actuarial background and the multidisciplinary financial skill set that actuaries develop throughout their university and qualification studies.
Thanks, Farah. And maybe I'll continue with you, Farah, if I go to the second part of this panel discussion, which is, where to from here for the actuarial profession. So do you have any views in terms of what the actuarial profession can be doing from here on?
Well, I'll go back to the earlier points of a life in large organizations requiring multiple experts from all sorts of skill sets. Now, I think throughout a number of the roles that I've performed at work over the last little while, a lot of the time you turn up one day and you think, you know what, the academic background probably isn't a huge deciding factor. I mean, I would sit next to accountants and lawyers who could do my job just as well as I can because they've had a similar corporate knowledge and experience. So you then think to yourself, well, what do actuaries bring to the table? And I would say that a very strong academic background, across multiple disciplines in finance, a focus on risk management, and an innate sense of conservatism, if I may. I think those are all very valuable traits that can be used to solve many corporate problems. So I've always come with a mindset, and I think it will be useful for actuaries working in investment to also consider, as part of their mindset, is that you're working in an area where you do not have, for example, a regulatory role. All right, so you are you're one of the people around the table, albeit a valuable one. So I would therefore think that, okay, from an actuarial education perspective, or from the profession's perspective, how do you then leverage off that platform of, okay, well, if you're one of the people in the room, how do you make yourself stand out without having that regulatory backing? And I would urge the crowd here to think and reflect upon that. And so I think I'm happy to open it up to others for their viewpoints as well.
Thank you, Farah. I think I absolutely agree around how do we leverage the collective, how do we build that actuarial community? Maybe I'll turn to Mark and Douglas with the same question about what we can do going forward as an actuarial profession to maintain the engagement, maintain the sustainability of the profession. Maybe firstly with you, Mark, because I know you're quite passionate about embedding the principles around customer care within the actual profession. And in fact, you'll be having a session later on in the summit about that. Perhaps give a bit of a sneak peek into that, Mark?
Yeah, sure. I think this might just be one point I might make too. Before I launched out to become a financial planner, I actually went and spoke to two other actuaries that were working in financial planning. A guy, George Borgoliver, who I think's deceased now, and Howard Pitts. And it was really good. Like, one of the good things about being an actuary is we do have a very big network out there. And, I contacted those people. They didn't know me from a bar of soap. And they made time in their busy day to see me and to talk to me about, the financial planning. And I really went in with eyes open. I remember, particularly, I think it was George, I can't do a South African accent, but he was saying, it's going to be a mighty big drop in salary for you if you go out there. You want to be really sure that you want to do this, And I really appreciated the honesty of those conversations, because I went and spoke to other people who were financial planners. But I think a point Farah made in his presentation, we do sort of, without sounding arrogant, connect better with other people that have had similar training to us, and often reflect back on the conversations I had with those guys, and that was actually sort of quite helpful in terms of helping me actually make a decision about whether to sort of launch out there into financial planning. In terms of, I'm having a session later today, because I've sort of, as I've gone on my journey now, I think I've sort of really believed that actuaries deal with the pool as a whole. I think the time has now come for us to touch the individual data points in that pool, to work with the individual customers. And I think if we had a practice area that was in financial planning that actually brought that knowledge that was gained from engaging with individual customers, looking at their goals and where they're going, and bringing all that and what their needs are and how best to satisfy those needs and their solutions. And if we then had a group of people that brought those insights to the actuarial table, we would be a much deeper and a much sort of richer profession. So that's what my session's a little bit about later today, to sort of explore that a bit further, because I think there's a big future for us there. So I think we should put some resources into researching about how to enter into financial planning, because I think we could make a really good contribution to the financial well-being of the Australian community by being in that space.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you. And Douglas, I know we've spoken about how do we fit wealth management within the Institute strategy, and I know the key priority that we've been talking about is how do we build a really attractive member value proposition. So perhaps in that theme, do you have any thoughts about what can we do to do that?
Yeah, so I was briefly the convener of WMSC before Phil, and I think the thing that I noticed when I wanted to get involved, there was that wealth management was sitting in the wrong place. So we were sitting in the life insurance practice committee. And so the thing we did over the last couple of years was simply moving the WMSC across to the superannuation, which is now called Superannuation and Investment Practice Committee. And if you sort of look at it holistically, investment or wealth management, I would say that superannuation is a subset of that rather than the other way around. So, as now in Phil's role, being represented on the SIPC is a starting point, whereas previously I had to attend LIWMPC meetings, which is enough of a mouthful, let alone anything else. But the problem was 95% of or more of the content was not of interest from a sort of wealth management perspective, or specifically for me an investment management perspective. So I think the first thing we've done is get ourselves in the right place, which is a starting point. The next thing is to build some kind of networks, and whether it's in financial planning, whether it's investment management, whether it's wealth more broadly, I think the stage that we are at in terms of the profile of what can the actuarial profession do for people working in investment and the broader wealth area, I think the first thing we really need to do is build a network and build a community, and just start engaging with each other. And maybe it's my perspective, which was trying to find that neutral ground, if you like, to share with people. Maybe it's touching on the reminiscence element for people who like being part of something that they identify with. Maybe it's more people like Mark who are particularly passionate about a specific area around the customer, but just starting to get people talking. COVID has really put, unfortunately, made it hard to arrange events in the way that I think we initially envisaged, because a lot of it's about getting people in a room, providing whether it's insight sessions or content that appeal, but it's also sort of trawling through people's networks and trying to find the people who started out as actuaries and maybe gave up or qualified and were lost to the profession. So yeah, I think for me it's about networking to start with.
Absolutely. I think networking is key. Thank you, Douglas. And let's continue with this conversation, and maybe I'll pass on to Josh to see if we've got any further reflections from members of the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Just a gentle reminder to all, we probably run short of time, probably can take a couple of questions, but for the Q&A section, I would encourage you to go into your app or scan through the QR code on your lanyard, and there should be a link to the Q&A there if there's any questions. But maybe just a first question from my end to Douglas, Mark, and Faro. Are there any advice you could provide to actuaries who are interested in this space? But obviously, we will be navigating through tough waves of different challenges. The career itself is probably not a very structured one, but like what would your pro tip be for each of the individuals working in this space?
I think you've got to be passionate about what you do. You've got to really stand up for what you believe in at the end of the day is kind of how I see it. I mean, when I worked as an actuary in corporate life, I was very hands-on. I got very involved in the process. I was involved in the underwriting and the claims, got involved with the advisors. Actually did a financial planning exams back in the 90s because I thought I needed to understand more about the advisors because I saw the advisor as my client. So I did that of my own initiative. I didn't wait for my employer to say, oh, Mark, you should go and do this. I think you need to find your own way and really look for things and get out there and be passionate and strong, and just don't hold back. Just stand by what you believe in, and you'll be amazed where it will lead you.
Yeah, I think one of the things, coming from the UK, education in the UK, particularly at university, is a lot more about proving you have the capacity to learn. I think here in Australia, it's a lot more vocational. So I think you sort of come at it from the mindset that the actuarial qualification has been a proof, if you like, that you can learn, that you can think in a particular way. And then having demonstrated that, how do I find the thing I want to work in that I really sort of love, which is back to what Mark's saying about the passion, but try and understand the different things that you could do and then use the actuarial skill set to prove to perhaps a wider audience that you have the capability to learn and adapt and think in a particular way. And diversity is a big buzzword, and it's very important, and it's often seen in very visible traits. But I think one of the bits that's missed is that diversity of thinking. And obviously, if you added an actuary to a pool of people who think in a particular way, then you're definitely adding something on that dimension, and that's something which is worth considering as well.
Yeah, Douglas, the diversity thing I think is the most important point that I would take away from this as well, because now that I've had a chance to look back at the years of work that's gone by, if you had chosen the straight and narrow traditional actuarial career, you could almost get through an entire work life and work with predominantly actuaries on a day-to-day basis. Whereas once you branch out, then you do get to work with many other different people of different backgrounds in your problem solving at work. So I would say that people who have an open mind and enjoy working with people from other professions, those will be the people who will succeed in working in the banking, finance, and investment wide areas.
Can I make one more comment there? Just CPD, I think you work so hard to become an actuary, and I think many of us sort of get to that and we achieve that. And then in terms of CPD, then we sort of fade away and we don't sort of invest in ourselves. And I notice that just observing a lot of actuaries, I think life is an ongoing learning experience. You've got to keep out there and absorbing more knowledge. And also taking feedback. Sometimes as highly skilled technical people, we struggle to take feedback. How can I possibly be wrong? But you've actually got to learn, and it's hard, and I struggle with this, to listen and actually reflect and keep a diary and actually, okay, that person's actually right. Actually, I need to learn from that experience and actually take that in and keep challenging yourself, and so go on that sort of ongoing learning experience.
Right, thanks Douglas, Mark, and Faro. I think we are running short of time here. perhaps for the panelists who have had specific questions through the Q&A, we'll reach out to you separately. But thank you all. I guess as a closing remark, just coming from the plenary, I probably can't match what Alan has mentioned, but it's really insightful to really gather some encouragement words and what needs to be done in if individuals are interested in anything outside of a traditional structured career pathway, in particular in financial planning, wealth management, as well as investments. That's really encouraging to see, and really ultimately, I guess, looking back in time, like the education pathway that we had in part 2 in control cycle, I guess one of my first question was like, why do we care about stakeholders? And it really comes into play in this workplace. So I guess, yeah, that's really insightful. Thanks, guys. As a closing remark here, I guess we would encourage you to provide us some feedback via the app. There would be a ratings from 1 to 5. And yeah, otherwise, thank you all for attending. There will be a second session held here. Please proceed to the next concurrent session. Thank you.
Thank you.